We just heard, first, the Mother's Day proclamation of Unitarian abolitionist and suffragist and author of the Battle Hymn of the Republic, Julia Ward Howe, issued in September 1870. And second, the one known carol for Mother's Day, written by British author and historian George Hare Leonard in the 1920s and set to a tune from the 14th century. And while it might seem that they have little to do with one another than a loose connection with what we know as Mother's Day, they're both part of a larger story. Now, we Unitarian Universalists like to claim some credit for Mother's Day, given Julia Ward Howe's proposal in 1872 for a Mother's Day for Peace that would take place on June 2nd each year. Julia and her husband Samuel were Unitarians active in a number of social causes, particularly the abolitionist movement to end slavery. The Howes had been committed to the Civil War as a means to do that, but as time went on, Julia saw more of the effects of violent conflict, going beyond the cost to the soldiers themselves to their widows and orphans who were left behind. She also believed that women had a responsibility to shape their societies at a political level. So when war broke out in Europe in 1870, Howe issued her appeal to womanhood throughout the world, calling on women everywhere to come together across all that divides humanity for the greater cause of peace. And though this is indeed part of the story of how Mother's Day came to be, so we can take some pride in that, there's more to the story. What we know as Mother's Day has been celebrated on the second Sunday in May for about 100 years, thanks to the efforts of Anna Jarvis of West Virginia. She held a memorial to her own mother, Ann Reeves Jarvis, on May 12, 1907. And then she successfully lobbied for Mother's Day to become an officially recognized holiday, first in West Virginia, then in other states, and then nationally in 1914. Now, Ann Jarvis, Anna's mother, had done her own organizing around the idea too. In 1858, Jarvis started what she called Mother's Day work clubs to improve health and sanitary conditions in the local towns. During the Civil War, when the western part of Virginia broke away to become West Virginia as part of the Union, the Mother's Day work club shifted their mission, feeding and clothing soldiers and nursing those sickened by outbreaks of typhoid fever and measles in the military camps. Doing similar work was the U.S. Sanitary Commission, which was founded and staffed by a number of Unitarians and Universalists, including Clara Barton and Julia Ward Howe. And so there's some thinking that Howe and Jarvis knew of each other or even worked together. Certainly, Julia Ward Howe's call for a Mother's Day for Peace was influenced by Ann Jarvis's Mother's Day work clubs, and that set the stage for Anna Jarvis to lobby for what we know as Mother's Day. I want to note, too, that for all that Mother's Day has become another hallmark holiday, Anna Jarvis opposed the almost immediate commercialization of Mother's Day, to the point where she was arrested in 1948 for disturbing the peace while protesting. Sadly, Jarvis died wishing that she had never started the holiday. And certainly most of us today are unaware of the origins of Mother's Day in terms of serving people in need and striving for peace. Now, in the United Kingdom, Mother's Day has very different origins. For one thing, the date isn't fixed on the calendar. When I was growing up and my father would remind me that Mother's Day was coming up, I was confused by the fact that it seemed to wander all through the month of March. Well, then he explained to me that it's actually a church holy day called Mothering Sunday, which I later learned was the fourth Sunday in Lent. So just as Lent and Easter move around the calendar based on the timing of the spring equinox relative to the phases of the moon, so does Mothering Sunday. Traditionally, Mothering Sunday was a day for people to return to their mother church, usually the church in which they'd been baptized or otherwise the nearest cathedral. After all, the Bible text selected in the Middle Ages for use on that particular Sunday talked about rejoicing, which provided a welcome break from the austerity of Lent, and used motherhood as a metaphor for the church. And then, just as happened in the case of our own flaming chalice, it was only a matter of time until symbolism gave rise to an actual practice. After the English Reformation, the same texts were used by the Book of Common Prayer, and the same practice of going mothering continued in Anglican churches. Other traditions arose too. Another of that Sunday's Bible texts, the feeding of the 5,000, inspired the baking of various types of wheaten cakes and iced buns. And children would pick violets, which would be growing wild by the early spring, and give them to their mothers. The Oxford Book of Carols, which includes George Hare Leonard's Mothering Sunday, amongst all of the more well-known carols for Advent and Christmas and Easter, it mentions these traditions and offers a proverb of sorts. They who go a-mothering find violets in the lane. Now, by the time that Leonard wrote his carol in the 1920s, Mothering Sunday was going through something of a revival, thanks to Englishwoman Constance Adelaide Smith. And why did Smith decide to reinvigorate those old traditions by advocating for Mothering Sunday as a day for recognizing Mother Church, mothers of earthly homes, Mary, Mother of Jesus, and Mother Nature? Why? It's because she read in a newspaper article in 1913 that an American named Anna Jarvis was trying to create Mother's Day as a holiday in the United States. Smith was so successful in her own efforts that when she died 25 years later, Mothering Sunday was said to be observed in every parish in Great Britain and in every country in the British Empire. And even though, thanks to American influences, Mothering Sunday is now known commercially as Mother's Day in England, it's still observed on the fourth Sunday in Lent. We can always learn something from tradition. Sometimes we realize we've made some progress, and an old tradition is definitely something that deserves to remain in the past. Sometimes we realize we've forgotten something that might be worth revisiting. For instance, one of the comments the Oxford Book of Carols makes about Mothering Sunday is as follows. One of the children home for the day would stay in and mind the house, so that the mother should be free for once to attend morning service at the church. One of the problems with written words is that you don't know if they should actually be said sarcastically or not. But yes, there are indeed two verses in Leonard's carol that Lucy did not sing for us about how the singer's sister is staying home to get the dinner ready, and how their mother is so happy to have this one day of all the year, a free day that's made just for her, that she'll actually go to church. And yes, I did check, but there's no section in the index of the Oxford Book of Carols for patriarchy. The fact is, our notions of mothering have changed, and Mother's Day needs to have much more nuance to it. We're not talking anymore about the heteronuclear family with its gendered stereotypes. We recognize different family types and we honor all different types of parents, and that needs to be reflected in our liturgy. Since I'm not a mother myself, let me share this blessing by one of my colleagues who is a mother, the the Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich. For all the mothers and mother figures, the grandmothers, aunts, and extended family members who mother, the soon-to-be mothers, the wish they were mothers, the never wanted to be mothers, the it's complicated mothers, the birth mothers, foster mothers, adoptive mothers, step-mothers, the used-to-be dad mothers, and more than one mom mothers, the single mothers, separated mothers, stay-at-home mothers, unhoused mothers, the grieving mothers, those who grieve their mothers, and those whose grief is complex, for all the communities that mother, and for all who depend on the great mother. You are held and beloved. So we reject the patriarchal notions of motherhood that have been part of these traditions. But I think there's another part that might be worth another look. Let me phrase it as a question. What might the idea of a mother church mean to Unitarian Universalists? I've met a number of UUs over the years who refer to the congregation where they first became a UU as their home church. But that would also apply to the congregation where someone was dedicated as a baby, or where they celebrated coming of age or bridging. What would it mean to have a particular Sunday when UUs are invited to visit the congregation where they first became a UU, or were dedicated, or came of age, or bridged? And why not make that Mother's Day, given that the second Sunday in Lent is for most people, that the second Sunday in May is for most people much easier to track than the fourth Sunday in Lent? Chances are those people's mothers still go to that home church, that mother church too. And for UUs, there's another reason to do this in May, in that May 15th is the anniversary of the consolidation that formed the Unitarian Universalist Association. And for UUFP members, there's yet another reason, in that May 14th is the anniversary of this congregation's charter by one of the UUA's predecessor organizations. I'm going to talk about both of those anniversaries in a couple of Sundays' time, but they are additional reasons to celebrate this congregation and this faith at this time of year. And of course, we wouldn't be celebrating Mother Church as a building in a specific place, but as a community of people. So many of us have realized the truth of this during the pandemic, that what holds us together isn't a set of walls and a roof. Our identity doesn't come from a street address. Rather, we are a church because of our connections with one another, our compassion for one another, the common purpose we share and the mission we serve, the welcome and the encouragement and the hope that we offer to and receive from one another on a weekly, even daily basis. As the Reverend Margaret Weiss has put it, the fellowship is not a place, it is a people. And I have proof. Yes, I know that in religion we're not supposed to talk about proving things, but really I can prove to you that this congregation is not our building, but our people. And that proof comes from this year's canvas. As David Walsh, writing for the Finance Committee, puts it, we probably should have called this the virus be damned canvas. With our buildings closed some 400 days and counting, no in-person meetings, and everyone having to learn to unmute themselves, David explains, we have just had the most successful canvas in our history, both in terms of dollars, but also in terms of every other statistical measurement. Let me give you just a couple of those statistics. Our goal was total pledges of 220,000. We not only met that, we exceeded it with total pledges of $222,031 That is worth a round of applause. Moreover, while the UUA average for the number of members who increased their pledge in a given year is 50%, half, 76% or 3/4 of UUFP members increased their pledge this year. Again, round of applause. The fact is that in spite of the pandemic and the limitations of online programming and the challenges of the last few years in so many ways, you have been incredibly generous. In one of his delightful Canvas updates, Henry Chambers said, "If we meet our goal, it'll be a miracle." And then under his breath, he added, "I need to ask Andrew whether he believes in miracles." So here's my answer. Yes, Henry, I do. But not because there was some detour around the laws of nature. No, I believe in miracles because it's the UUFP itself that is the miracle. It's this church that is the wonder. It's this community of people that keeps rising to the challenges of the present with a vision for the future. The fellowship is not a place, it is a people. The UUFP is all of you, and that is the miracle. So this Mother's Day, I invite you to keep in mind the origins of this holiday, created out of the call to serve people in need, the urgency of striving for peace. I encourage you to reflect on the meaning of mothering in your own life. And I ask you to imagine this congregation, this Mother Church, as a community of the people of everyday miracles, rising to meet today's challenges with our bold vision for tomorrow. May it be so.